welcome to Griffonomics. I was thinking about this analogy earlier. If you walk into like a master mechanic's garage, right, and you see them just completely tearing apart a high-performance sports car.
Oh, yeah, like engine block in pieces on the floor.
Exactly. I mean, we are talking the transmission is disassembled. There are titanium parts scattered across the workbenches just sitting on a tarp. Your very first thought, naturally, is going to be, wow, that car must have been in a terrible wreck.
Right, because, I mean, it's basic human nature to
Right.
assume a catastrophic failure in that scenario. We're totally conditioned to believe that you do not take something apart unless it has, fundamentally stopped working.
Yeah, the whole if it ain't broke, don't fix it mentality,
Yeah.
which applies to pretty much everything we do in business and engineering.
It's exactly.
It
But
is.
then you walk up to the mechanic, he wipes the grease off his hands, looks up at you and says, "No, this car was running perfectly. In fact, it was setting track records just yesterday. I'm tearing it apart because I want it to fly."
Which is just an entirely counterintuitive leap. You do not overhaul a winning machine, especially one that's setting records, unless you see a completely different type of race coming over the horizon.
You only take that kind of massive operational risk if the fundamental physics of the competition are about to change.
And that visual, tearing down a championship engine to build something entirely new is just the perfect lens for what we are looking at today. Welcome to a brand new deep dive.
It's a big one today.
It really is. For you listening, we are zeroing in on an incredible corporate metamorphosis. We're doing an agentic AI inflection analysis, and our microscope is focused entirely on Autodesk.
And we are unpacking their massive transition, right? Moving from being a traditional seat-based design software company into a consumption-based make and operate platform. And I mean, the stakes here are just wild.
They really are. Because this isn't just a software update. We are looking at a fundamental business model pivot happening in real time.
Yeah, this company is dealing head-on with severe human labor shortages across the globe while simultaneously trying to manage the total digitization of the physical world.
The architecture and engineering industries are standing at a precipice, and Autodesk is trying to pave the bridge as they walk on it.
Right. And to figure out how they are actually doing this, we brought in a massive stack of sources.
Yeah, we are pulling directly from Autodesk's Q4 2026 earnings call transcripts. They're freshly filed SEC documents. So we are digging into the 10K and the 8K.
And we're also looking through a whole suite of institutional analyst reports, right? From Citi, Jefferies, Macquarie, JP Morgan, Barclays, and BTI.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because Autodesk just reported a blowout year. I mean, their revenue is surging. They're generating massive cash flow. By all traditional metrics, they are winning the race.
Handily winning it, yeah.
And yet, almost immediately after posting these numbers, they turned around and fired 1,000 sales employees. That is the engine on the floor. I want to figure out the why.
Well, to get to the why behind that restructuring, we first have to understand the engine they were already running. I mean, before we analyze where they are going with artificial intelligence, we really have to look at the bedrock of their current business.
Right, how their products are actually converging.
Exactly, because that convergence is what gave them the leverage to make such a drastic cut in the first place.
Let's start with their reputation in the broader market. Because I feel like if you aren't an architect or a mechanical engineer, you might just think of Autodesk as, the AutoCAD company.
Oh, for sure. You picture someone on a computer drawing a 2D floor plan for a house.
Right. But going through these SEC filings, it becomes obvious that they are so much more deeply embedded in the global economy than just digital drafting.
The AutoCAD company label is honestly a relic of the 1990s. Today, if we break down their operations, Autodesk is built on 4 core product families. And analyzing these segments is like looking at a heat map of global infrastructure and manufacturing demand.
So what's the biggest one?
The first, and by far the largest driver of their business, is the AEQ segment. That stands for Architecture, Engineering, Construction, and Operations.
Okay, so the heavy physical world stuff.
Exactly. This segment alone brought in $3.58 billion in revenue for the fiscal year. And get this, it represents a 22% year-over-year growth rate.
Wait, I have to pause on that number. 22% growth at a multi-billion-dollar scale is absurd.
It really is.
When a software product matures, you usually see growth taper off into like the mid-single digits. Growing at 22% implies a hyper-growth engine, not a legacy software suite.
Mm-hmm.
What is actually inside that AECO bucket that people are buying so aggressively?
Well, it is being driven by the convergence of several complex tools. So they sell AEC collections, which are these massive bundles of software, and they utilize enterprise business agreements for their largest clients.
Right.
But the real catalyst, the thing actually driving that 22% growth, is the Autodesk Construction Cloud, which is transitioning into a broader platform known as Forma for construction.
Forma, okay. How does that work in practice?
To understand why this is growing so fast, just consider how a hospital is built. Historically, the architect would design the building in one software silo, right? Then, the structural engineer would figure out the load-bearing steel in another.
And they wouldn't really talk to each other seamlessly.
Exactly. Then the MEP contractors, the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing teams, they would try to route the massive HVAC ducts and water pipes. And if the architect moved a wall, the MEP contractor might not find out until they were physically standing on the job site with a pipe that suddenly had nowhere to go.
Which leads to massive change orders, budget overruns, and delays. The classic construction nightmare.
Exactly. The problem Forma solves. Customers are now demanding that design and construction workflows speak to each other seamlessly in the cloud. They want a single source of truth.
So when the architect moves the digital wall, the MEP contractor's digital pipe automatically flags a collision in real time.
Yes. That risk reduction is so valuable that construction firms are just throwing money at the platform.
That makes total sense. You are essentially buying an insurance policy against miscommunication on a billion-dollar job site. Okay, so what is the second pillar?
The second segment is AutoCAD and AutoCAD LT. This is what we mentioned earlier, the legacy core, the famous digital drafting table.
See, I assumed this segment would be flatlining or slowly dying off as everyone moves to 3D. But looking at the numbers, it generated $1.78 billion and grew at 14%. How is a 2D drafting tool still pulling in almost $2 billion and growing by double digits?
Because the world still runs on 2D documentation. I mean, you can build the most beautiful 3D model of a skyscraper in the world, but eventually someone has to print out a schematic to give to the person pouring the concrete.
Good point. You can't hand an iPad to every single person tying rebar.
Right. AutoCAD provides the essential digital tools used independently by smaller firms or alongside their industry-specific 3D applications by the massive conglomerates. It is the universal language of design, and it just refuses to fade away.
Okay, so we've got Akiko and AutoCAD. What's the third pillar?
Then we move to the third pillar, which is the MFG, or manufacturing segment. This is rapidly accelerating. It hit $1.38 billion and grew at 16%.
And the analyst reports kept pointing to a specific product driving this manufacturing growth. They kept talking about Fusion.
Fusion is a fascinating piece of technology. It is a cloud-based 3D CAD, CAM, and CAE tool.
Okay, we need to decode those acronyms for the listener. CAD is computer-aided design. That's the drawing part. What are CAM and CAE?
So CAM stands for computer-aided manufacturing. Once you design a part in CAD, CAM is the software that translates that digital model into physical machine code, often called G-code.
Oh, so it talks to the actual robots.
Exactly. It tells the robotic arm or the CNC milling machine on the factory floor exactly how fast to spin the drill bit, what angle to cut the titanium, and how deep to go.
And CAE?
CAE stands for computer-aided engineering. This is the simulation side. Before you ever mill that titanium part, CAE lets you simulate how it will react to heat, vibration, or structural stress.
Oh, wow. So Fusion just connects that entire product development process from the initial drawing to the stress test to the literal cutting of the metal on a single unified cloud platform.
Yes, and mid-market manufacturers are adopting it at a staggering rate because it digitizes their entire operation without forcing them to buy 10 different specialized software packages.
That's incredibly sticky. So we have buildings, we have 2D blueprints, we have manufacturing. What is the final piece of the puzzle?
The fourth segment is media and entertainment, or M&E. It is their smallest segment at $332 million, growing at a more modest 5%. This includes tools like Maya and 3ds Max.
Right, Maya? Like the animation software.
Exactly. These are the industry standards for digital sculpting, animation, and visual effects. If you play a high-end video game or watch a blockbuster superhero film, you are looking at work created in Maya.
It seems a bit out of place compared to the other three.
Yeah.
Why does a company focused on concrete, steel, and manufacturing care about animating dragons for a movie?
Well, Well, because the underlying mathematics are actually incredibly similar. I mean, the physics engine required to make a digital dragon's wing flap realistically in a movie is not far removed from the fluid dynamics required to simulate wind shear against a suspension bridge.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah, the rendering technology they develop for Hollywood often trickles down to help an architect create a photorealistic walkthrough of a new airport terminal.
That is a brilliant way to look at it. The synergy between entertainment rendering and structural simulation.
Exactly.
So when you lay out those 4 pillars, AECO, AutoCAD, manufacturing, and media and entertainment, it really hits home that Autodesk is not just a software vendor. They're providing the core digital infrastructure for the physical world.
Without a doubt.
But, what actually jumped off the page for me in these SEC filings wasn't the products themselves. It was the sheer power of their financial predictability. I want to look at 2 specific numbers. Their 97% recurring revenue base and their net revenue retention, or NR3, which sits consistently above 110%.
Right. And any Wall Street analyst looking at a SaaS company, software as a service, will tell you that net revenue retention is arguably the most vital pulse check of a company's health.
Let's translate this into the real world for a second. The best analogy I could come up with while reading through these dense financial metrics is to imagine a subscription box service. Like those services that send you artisanal coffee or pet toys every month.
Oh, love those.
Right. But in this scenario, instead of getting dog treats, the clients are massive global conglomerates. And the box they receive contains the mandatory digital tools required to build suspension bridges and electric vehicles. The 97% recurring revenue means practically nobody ever cancels their subscription.
It's incredible retention.
It is, but the NR3, the net revenue retention of 110%, means not only are they not canceling, but every year they voluntarily pay 10% more. They keep upgrading their subscription box to the premium tier, they add more users, they buy extra cloud credits every single year.
Yeah, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the math behind an NR3 strictly above 110% is astonishing when you play it out over time. It essentially means that if Autodesk's entire global sales team went on strike for 12 months and the company did not sign a single net new customer all year, their total revenue would still grow by over 10%.
Wait, really? Just from existing customers?
That's from existing. The customer base is inherently expansive. An engineering firm wins a new contract, so they need to hire 10 more designers. That requires 10 more software seats. They decide to move their document management to the cloud, so they pay for Autodesk Docs. It is a compounding growth engine built entirely on deepening existing relationships.
I look at that 97% retention rate, and I don't just see customer satisfaction. I see pure, unadulterated operational lock-in. It means the software isn't just a tool sitting on a desktop. It has become the central nervous system of these enterprises.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, if a new CIO comes into a top-tier architecture firm and says, hey, let's save some money and rip Autodesk out. Let's switch to a cheaper competitor. I mean, the entire firm would grind to a halt. Decades of past project files wouldn't open properly. The architects couldn't seamlessly share data with the structural engineers. The retraining costs alone would bankrupt the firm.
The switching costs are astronomically high. You are not just changing a tool. You are attempting to change the underlying language your company uses to communicate complex physical ideas.
So we have this highly predictable, deeply entrenched, sticky business model.
Yeah.
How did that actually translate into dollars at the close of their fiscal year 2026?
It translated into a masterclass of financial execution. I mean, for the full fiscal year 2026, Autodesk reported a top-line net revenue of $7.21 billion.
Wow.
That represents an 18% increase year over year, and they did not limp across the finish line. Q4 alone brought in a very robust $1.96 billion.
That's a huge finish. And I noticed the analysts weren't just looking at the $7.21 billion they already collected. They were heavily focused on a metric called RPO. Walk us through why that matters.
So RPO stands for Remaining Performance Obligations. In enterprise software, companies often sign multi-year contracts. If a customer signs a 3-year deal worth $3 million, Autodesk doesn't recognize all $3 million as revenue on day one.
Because they haven't provided all 3 years of service yet.
Exactly. They recognize it gradually as they deliver the software service over time. So the RPO represents all the money that customers are legally contracted to pay Autodesk, but that Autodesk hasn't yet recognized as revenue on the income statement. It is the ultimate measure of pent-up future growth.
Ah, so it's like a massive reservoir of guaranteed cash waiting behind a dam, and they just slowly open the spillway every quarter.
That's a great way to picture it. And that reservoir is swelling. Total RPO ballooned by 20% year over year to reach $8.30 billion.
Over $8 billion.
Right. And even more telling is the current RPO, which is the portion of that money they expect to recognize as revenue in just the next 12 months. That figure sits at $5.48 billion. It provides management with an incredible safety net. They walk into the new fiscal year already knowing where over $5 billion is coming from.
Which gives them the freedom to operate strategically rather than desperately. Now, top-line revenue is great, but let's talk about the actual cash left over after post the bills. Free cash flow is the ultimate truth teller in a corporate filing.
And the truth here is quite lucrative. In FY26, Autodesk generated an astonishing $2.41 billion in free cash flow.
Over $2.4 billion in pure unencumbered cash generated in a single 12-month period.
That is wild. What are they doing with it? They clearly aren't just stuffing it in a corporate mattress. No, management operates with a highly disciplined capital return strategy. They have explicitly committed to applying approximately 50% of their free cash flow directly to share buybacks. During FY26, they went into the open market and repurchased 5 million of their own shares for roughly $1.4 billion.
I always find share buybacks in the tech sector interesting. Some critics argue that buying back stock is a sign a company has run out of innovative ideas to invest in. But in the enterprise software space, it serves a very specific mechanical purpose regarding employee compensation, doesn't it?
It serves as a necessary counterbalance. I mean, tech companies compete fiercely for top engineering talent, and they attract that talent by offering heavy stock-based compensation. They give their employees shares. However, every time you print new shares to give to an employee, you dilute the ownership stake of your existing public shareholders.
Right, the pie gets cut into smaller and smaller slices.
Exactly. By taking $1.4 billion of their free cash flow and buying back 5 million shares off the open market, Autodesk is effectively neutralizing that dilution. They're soaking up the extra shares they printed, keeping the total share count strictly managed, and protecting the earnings per share metric that Wall Street demands.
Okay, so the financial mechanics are humming flawlessly. But what I found equally fascinating in these reports is what was missing. Usually when you read a 10K, there is a massive section dedicated to legal risks, ongoing investigations, and regulatory doom and gloom.
Oh yeah, the risk factor section of a 10K is traditionally where corporate lawyers detail every possible nightmare scenario. And for a while, Autodesk had a very real, very tangible dark cloud hanging over them.
Right. There were serious investigations into how they were calculating their free cash flow and non-GAAP operating margins. And I mean, in the post-Enron world, anytime the government questions your cash flow accounting, investors tend to panic.
The scrutiny was intense, but the recent filings provide absolute closure. The Internal Audit Committee concluded its investigation back in May 2024. But the real sigh of relief came externally. Both the SEC and the U.S. Attorney's Office officially closed their respective inquiries into the matter in August 2025, and they did so without taking any enforcement action whatsoever.
Wow, clean sweep.
Completely. And to put a final bow on it, a related federal securities class action lawsuit, which always follows these types of investigations, was dismissed with prejudice in January 2026.
Dismissed with prejudice, meaning the plaintiffs can't even try to bring the same claim back to court. Okay, I want to pause and synthesize this for you listening, because the setup here is critical to understanding the rest of this deep dive.
It really is the foundation.
We're looking at a company that is essentially the digital operating system for the physical world. They have a 97% retention rate. They have an $8.3 billion backlog of contracted revenue. They generated $2.4 billion in pure cash last year. And the federal government just handed them a totally clean bill of legal health. Which brings me to the massive glaring contradiction that we teased at the very beginning of this deep dive.
The engine teardown.
Exactly. I am going to put myself in the shoes of an employee or a shareholder, and I have to push back on management's logic here. If you are the CEO and your engine is performing perfectly, why on earth did you announce a major restructuring in January 2026? Why did you cut 7% of your global workforce, roughly 1,000 human beings?
It's a huge move.
It seems completely irrational. You do not fire 1,000 people when they're printing cash and winning the championship. Make it make sense.
This is where we return to your mechanic analogy. You tear apart the winning engine because the rules of the race are about to change. To understand the restructuring, you really have to look at who is impacted.
Right, because it wasn't everyone.
No, these weren't product engineers or software developers. The cuts heavily targeted their customer-facing sales functions. And the reason they are overhauling their sales team comes down to a structural pivot they call the new transaction model, or NTM.
NTM. This acronym was plastered all over the Citi and JP Morgan reports. Walk us through the mechanics of this model. How did Autodesk used to sell software, and what are they doing now?
Historically, enterprise software companies relied heavily on indirect channel sales. Autodesk didn't want to deal with the logistical nightmare of quoting, invoicing, and collecting payments from thousands of small architecture firms around the world. So they utilized massive global distributors and regional resellers.
Basically outsourcing the sales headache.
Exactly. The reseller would be the one shaking hands with the customer. The reseller would manage the relationship, handle the complex billing, and in return, they would take a significant cut of the revenue as their margin. Autodesk was largely insulated from the end user.
It's similar to the traditional auto industry. Ford doesn't sell you a car directly. They sell it to a local dealership, and the dealership sells it to you. The dealership controls the final transaction.
That is a perfect parallel. But over the last few years, Autodesk has been fundamentally dismantling that dealership model. Under the new transaction model, they are aggressively shifting toward direct customer relationships.
So bypassing the partners?
Not entirely. A solution provider, their term for a channel partner, might still be involved in recommending the software or providing a price quote. But the actual financial transaction, the swiping of the credit card or the processing of the purchase order, now occurs directly between Autodesk and the end customer.
So Autodesk is cutting out the middleman's billing system. They are establishing a direct financial tether to the person using the software. Is it actually working?
The numbers suggest a massive success. According to the filings, direct sales now drive 63% of Autodesk's total revenue. That is up dramatically from just 42% in the prior year. In Q4 alone, this new transaction model contributed an incremental $137 million to revenue and $185 million to billings.
Okay, I see the financial benefit. By processing the transaction directly, Autodesk likely keeps a larger slice of the pie and gains incredibly valuable direct data on customer purchasing habits.
Exactly. The data is huge.
But I still don't understand how that justifies firing 1,000 sales professionals. If direct sales are booming, shouldn't you want more salespeople to handle that volume?
You would think so, until you look at the incentive structures. The way Autodesk pays its partners and its internal teams is fundamentally changing to match this new reality. Think back to that 110% net revenue retention metric we talked about.
The automatic upgrades.
Right. In the past, under the old model, you would pay a sales rep or a channel partner a hefty commission simply for getting a customer to renew their existing software contract.
Wait, if the customer is an engineering firm that literally cannot open its blueprints without Autodesk, their renewal is practically guaranteed. They have no choice but to renew. Paying a massive commission to a salesperson for securing an automatic renewal is basically setting money on fire.
You hit the nail on the head. Autodesk realized they were heavily subsidizing administrative renewals. So under the new transaction model, they're pushing those low-end guaranteed renewals into an automated self-service portal. The customer just logs in, clicks a button, and renews directly.
Oh, wow.
And because of that automation, you suddenly do not need a massive army of customer-facing sales reps manually processing renewal paperwork.
Ah, the light bulb just went on.
Right. Autodesk went to their channel partners and their remaining sales force and completely changed the rules of engagement. They essentially said, the days of earning fat commissions on easy renewals are over. You will receive significantly lower compensation for merely maintaining an account.
Because the software sells itself at that point.
Exactly. If you want to make real money, you are now highly incentivized to hunt for net new business or to convince an existing customer to radically expand their footprint into new products.
They are forcing a cultural shift. They are taking a sales force made up of farmers, people who just comfortably harvest the automatic renewals every year, and telling them they have to become hunters.
And that kind of cultural pivot is notoriously painful. It requires a different psychological profile, a different skill set, and a different organizational structure. You are eliminating layers of account management that are no longer strictly necessary.
Which explains the 1,000 layoffs.
Exactly. Financially, implementing this transition triggered a $100 million pre-tax restructuring charge in Q4. Moving forward, it will result in $135 million to $160 million in discrete cash outflows during fiscal year 2027, primarily related to employee severance and termination benefits.
You know, whenever you mess with the compensation structure of a sales team at a $7 billion company, you are inviting chaos. If you fire 1,000 reps, redraw territories, and tell the remaining staff that their old way of making money is dead, who is actually going to close the deals in the first and second quarters while the dust settles?
Well, this raises an important question, and Wall Street analysts raised that exact concern. And to management's credit, they were incredibly transparent about the impending turbulence.
Did they lower guidance?
During the earnings call, the CFO, Janesh Moorjani, emphasized that their fiscal 2027 guidance embeds a heavy dose of prudence. They guided for FY27 revenue to land between $8.1 billion and $8.17 billion. But they explicitly warned investors to expect short-term disruption to early-year billings.
Because deals will just get lost in the shuffle.
Right. When you restructure a global sales force, deals inevitably slip. A contract that was supposed to close in April might get pushed to July because the account manager was let go and a new rep had to take over.
So they're willingly taking a hit to their short-term optics. They're telling the market, look, Q1 and Q2 might look a little messy, but the long-term structural advantage of owning the direct financial relationship with the customer and eliminating the bloat of renewal commissions is worth the pain.
It is a classic short-term pain for long-term leverage strategy, but there is a second, arguably more important reason for freeing up this capital.
Let's hear it.
The millions of dollars they save by automating renewals and thinning the sales herd isn't just dropping to the bottom line to sit in a bank account. They are aggressively reallocating those resources into their core strategic priorities: cloud infrastructure, unified platforms, and specifically the AI arms race.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because you cannot read a corporate document today without tripping over the letters A and I.
It's everywhere.
Every company on earth is screaming about their artificial intelligence strategy. I mean, you could read an earnings transcript from a company that manufactures shoelaces, and the CEO will mention AI 40 times. But Autodesk isn't just slapping a chatbot into AutoCAD and calling it a day. They are freeing up massive capital to reinvest directly into what they're calling Agentic AI for the physical world. And their flagship initiative is codenamed Project Bernini.
Bernini.
I need you to break this down for us. What makes Project Bernini different from the generic AI everyone else is playing with?
To appreciate Bernini, we first have to highlight the fatal flaw of the AI that most consumers are familiar with today. When the average person thinks of generative AI, they think of generic large language models, or LLMs.
Right, like ChatGPT.
Exactly. You type a prompt into a text box, and it writes a poem. Or you ask an image generator for a picture of a futuristic city, and it spits out a stunning, hyper-realistic 2D image.
Right. But those models are fundamentally probabilistic.
Yeah.
They don't actually understand what a city is. They're just predicting the next word or the next pixel based on statistical patterns they scrape from the internet.
Yes, and that means they hallucinate.
Oh, heavily. I asked an image generator to draw a hand the other day, and it gave the person 7 fingers.
And that is the crux of the issue. In poetry or digital art, a hallucination is a funny quirk. In the architecture, engineering, and construction space, a statistical hallucination is a catastrophic structural failure.
Yeah, you can't have a 7-fingered bridge.
Exactly. A generic LLM generating a 2D image of a bridge does not understand geometric depth. It does not understand tensile strength. It has zero concept of gravity or material science.
You know, the analogy I use to separate the two is comparing standard AI to an artist painting a portrait of a house versus Project Bernini, which is the architect and the structural engineer actually building it.
That's a great way to think about it.
The artist, the generic LLM, can paint a beautiful Victorian home with a sprawling living room. But if you walk up to the artist and ask, hey, what happens if I remove that load-bearing wall in the center of the room? The artist just stares at you. They have no idea. They just painted a flat picture.
The artist versus architect analogy is spot on. Project Bernini is a proprietary 3D foundational model. It is not trained on flat text or 2D images. It is trained on massive amounts of multimodal 3D data.
Real-world data.
And this is the secret weapon. Autodesk uniquely possesses this data because they have been the global standard for 3D design for decades. They have millions of complex, real-world structural models in their vault. Because it is trained on actual physical world data, Bernini understands true physical geometry. It understands constructability.
So sticking with our living room example, if a human designer uses Bernini to generate a building layout and then decides to move that central wall, the AI understands the downstream implications.
Yes, it inherently knows that moving the wall impacts the HVAC ductwork hidden above the ceiling.
It instantly reroutes the electrical wiring.
It calculates the new load distribution for the roof, and it checks all of those changes against local fire codes. It isn't just sketching, it is actively engineering.
Wow. And that deep contextual understanding of complex design-to-make workflows creates an incredibly wide competitive moat. I saw in the reports, according to several analysts, particularly from firms like Jefferies and Macquarie Autodesk, is estimated to be 4 to 5 years ahead of both their legacy CAD competitors and the massive hyperscalers in this specific domain.
Yeah, a massive lead.
Wait, I have to challenge that timeline. You're telling me they are 4 to 5 years ahead of the hyperscalers, meaning Google, Amazon, Microsoft. Those companies have practically infinite compute budgets.
Huh.
They're spending tens of billions of dollars on AI data centers. How can an enterprise software company like Autodesk be beating the trillion-dollar tech giants at the AI game?
It comes down to the difference between horizontal and vertical platforms and the insurmountable value of proprietary data. The hyperscalers are building horizontal models. They want an AI that can do a little bit of everything, write Python code, draft an email, summarize a legal brief, and pass the medical boards.
Right, a jack of all trades.
But because they are spread so wide, they lack the nuanced vertical understanding of highly complex industrial workflows. More importantly, the hyperscalers lack the training data.
Oh, because they can't just scrape the internet for it.
Exactly. You cannot just scrape Wikipedia or Reddit to learn how to design a complex fluid dynamic system for a 50-story commercial skyscraper. That highly specialized 3D structural data does not exist on the open web. It lives securely inside Autodesk's ecosystem. Google cannot buy that data. They would have to recreate decades of engineering history from scratch.
The proprietary data moat. It's the ultimate trump card in the AI era. Whoever owns the highest quality, most niche data wins the vertical. And it seems Autodesk isn't just holding this AI back as a product to sell to architects. They are turning it inward to radically accelerate their own corporate metabolism, aren't they?
Oh, the innovation velocity metric they shared on their earnings call is frankly hard to believe until you unpack the mechanics. Historically, developing a new feature for a complex physics engine could take an agonizing amount of time. Going from theoretical research to prototyping to testing to deploying a live product feature might take a decade.
A full 10 years.
Right. But by utilizing their own AI internally, for instance, using specialized cloud code to assist their own software developers, and using AI to run automated regression testing on new code bases, Autodesk has managed to compress that decade-long R&D cycle down to just 3 to 6 months.
From 10 years to 3 months. That is an exponential compounding rate of innovation. I mean, if they can prototype and deploy a new structural simulation feature in the time it takes a legacy competitor just to form a committee to study the trend, the gap between them and the rest of the market will become unbridgeable.
Absolutely unbridgeable.
So they have this incredibly powerful, physics-aware 3D AI. The technology is undeniably brilliant. But a great technology only becomes a great business if the macroeconomy is demanding what you are supplying. How does Project Bernini translate into actual market expansion?
Well, this brings us to the macroeconomic reality of the physical world right now. The primary driver pulling Autodesk's AI into the market is a massive systemic capacity shortage.
If you talk to anyone who runs a construction firm, manages a manufacturing plant, or oversees infrastructure projects, their number one complaint is never about interest rates, and it's rarely about supply chain bottlenecks anymore.
Yeah.
Their absolute biggest nightmare is finding human beings.
Yes. They cannot find enough skilled welders, plumbers, architects, or structural engineers. The boomer generation of master tradespeople and senior engineers is retiring, and there are not enough young professionals entering those specific fields to replace them.
So there's a fundamental global labor shortage colliding with a surging demand to build and rebuild physical infrastructure.
Right. The world simply does not have the human capacity to meet its own developmental goals. And this is where Autodesk's narrative around artificial intelligence takes a very specific, very strategic turn. They are explicitly positioning their agentic AI not as a cost-cutting tool designed to replace human workers, but as incremental capacity to solve this exact bottleneck.
That's a great reframe.
Yeah, they're going to engineering firms and saying, look, we know you are turning down lucrative contracts because you don't have enough senior engineers to bid on the work. Our AI will act as the extra engineering capacity you physically cannot hire.
That is a brilliant psychological framing. It shifts AI from being the villain coming for your job to being the invisible junior partner helping you double your output.
Yeah.
And where is all this building demand actually coming from? Because if you read the headlines, commercial real estate is supposed to be dead. We all know about the empty office towers and major metropolitan downtowns. You would assume that with a weak commercial real estate market, Autodesk's architecture and construction revenue would be taking a massive hit. Yet, as we discussed, the AECO segment grew by 22%. How do you reconcile that?
The weakness in traditional commercial office space is real, but it is being entirely offset and then overwhelmed by massive, sustained investments in three other specific areas.
Which are?
First, the global boom in data centers required to support the broader AI revolution. Second, massive federal and state infrastructure projects, think highway systems, bridges, and power grid modernization. And third, the massive reshoring of industrial manufacturing facilities as countries try to secure their domestic supply chains.
So we aren't building high-rise offices. We are building billion-dollar semiconductor fabs in Arizona and hyperscale data centers in Virginia.
Exactly, and the dynamics of who chooses the software on those mega projects have shifted.
Also,
Historically, the general contractor might have picked whatever software they liked best. Today, the owner-operators, the massive tech giants funding the data centers, or the government agencies funding the bridges, are dictating the technology stack. If a construction firm wants to bid on a $2 billion data center project, the owner is mandating in the contract that they use a connected cloud platform like Autodesk Construction Cloud.
because they want the visibility.
Yes. The owner demands total digital visibility into the project from day one to completion.
Which perfectly transitions into the most strategic concept in this entire analysis, the idea of lifecycle expansion. Because everything we've talked about so far, drawing the blueprint, testing the stress points, managing the construction, happens before the building actually opens. But Autodesk is making a massive push to extend their reach long after the ribbon-cutting ceremony.
What's fascinating here is how the timeline changes. This is the shift from plan and design to make and operate. It fundamentally alters the timeline of Autodesk's relationship with a physical asset.
Right. Historically, an architecture firm would use an Autodesk product to plan a building. That design phase might last 6 months, maybe 2 years for a massive project. Once the final blueprints were handed over and construction finished, Autodesk's active involvement in that building was largely over.
They sold the digital pencil used to draw the blueprints, and once the drawing was done, they walked away. But now, with products like Autodesk Tandem, they are staying embedded in the asset for its entire functional lifespan.
How does Tandem actually do that?
As the building is constructed using Autodesk Build, millions of data points are captured. Where exactly is every wire? What is the exact specification of the HVAC unit on the roof? When the building is finished, Tandem takes all that data and creates a highly detailed, functional digital twin of the physical structure.
Okay, let's explain what a digital twin actually does for the person who owns the building.
Imagine you own a massive commercial hospital. Instead of relying on a basement full of paper blueprints that haven't been updated since 1998, you have a 3D digital replica of the hospital on a tablet.
Like a video game version of the building.
Exactly. You can connect your physical operational systems, the smart thermostats, the security cameras, the energy management grid, directly into that digital twin via sensors. You can watch, in real time, how energy is flowing through the building. You can run simulations to see how much money you would save if you lowered the ambient temperature of the north wing by 2 degrees during the summer.
So they are turning fragmented, static building data into a live, ongoing stream of business intelligence. And because a hospital or a data center operates for 50 years, Autodesk just expanded their monetization window on that asset from a 2-year design phase to a 50-year operational phase.
It is an incredible expansion of TAM.
And that leads us to the absolute holy grail of this deep dive, the concept of monetizing machine-driven capacity. If we connect all the dots we've laid out, the AI that can actually engineer, the direct billing through the new transaction model, and the 50-year operational life cycles through digital twins, you get a profound structural shift in how Autodesk makes its money.
Right.
Because if agentic AI is handling systems-level automation, if the AI is actively optimizing a building's energy usage 24/7, or running 10,000 iteration stress tests on a new jet engine part overnight while the human engineers are asleep, the actual user of the software is no longer a human being sitting at a desk from 9 to 5.
The machine itself becomes the user. And a machine does not sleep. It works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, at speeds a human couldn't fathom. If you are Autodesk, you quickly realize that your old business model is broken. You cannot just sell a single $2,000 annual seat license for an AI agent that is doing the equivalent work of 50 senior engineers around the clock. You are leaving an unfathomable amount of value on the table.
It would be like charging a flat $10 monthly fee for electricity, regardless of whether the person lives in a tiny apartment or runs a massive aluminum smelting plant.
Exactly the problem. This is why Autodesk is aggressively rolling out consumption-based pricing models. They are transitioning away from merely monetizing a human's time and shifting toward monetizing machine-driven capacity. They are introducing things like flex tokens, which customers buy in bulk and spend as they run heavy AI simulations.
So they pay per compute, basically.
Right. They are also heavily monetizing API usage and MCP server usage fees.
Let's break those two acronyms down because they are crucial to understanding the future revenue streams. What is an API in this context, and what is an MCP?
So API stands for Application Programming Interface. Think of it as a digital handshake. When a massive enterprise client wants their proprietary internal software to automatically pull data out of Autodesk's cloud, they use an API. In the past, providing that connection might have been a flat fee. Now, it is metered. Every time the client's automated system pulls a massive data set, a microtransaction occurs. The more data the machines pull, the more the client pays.
Oh, wow. And MCP?
MCP stands for Model Context Protocol. This is relatively newer. Think of an MCP as a standardized, secure plugin that allows an AI model to safely talk to an external database. If Autodesk's AI is designing a skyscraper in Miami, it needs to know the specific local building codes for hurricane wind resistance. It uses an MCP to fetch that local code data. Autodesk can charge a fee for the AI utilizing that protocol to access external context.
So by charging for tokens, APIs, and MCPs, Autodesk unlocks a net new vector of what Wall Street is calling monetizable time. This is the brilliant terminal value unlock. For the last 30 years, Autodesk's total addressable market was inherently capped by the global population of human engineers. If there are only 5 million architects in the world, you can only sell 5 million seats. But by pivoting to consumption, you replace the hard limitation of human headcount with the boundless exponential scale of machine compute.
It fundamentally changes the ceiling of the company.
It sounds like a flawless victory. It feels like they have solved the puzzle of enterprise software in the AI era. But as with any major corporate inflection point, nothing exists in a vacuum. There are massive industry shifts happening, and Wall Street is never universally positive. We have to look at the bear case. What are the skeptics and the analysts saying could derail this master plan?
The risks are significant, and they fall into a few distinct, very serious categories. The first is a macroeconomic concept known as AI budget displacement.
I saw this explicitly called out in the note from Citi. They actually downgraded the entire software sector based on this specific fear. Explain the mechanics of budget displacement.
The core thesis from Citi revolves around the finite nature of corporate IT budgets. If you are a chief information officer at a Fortune 500 company, you have a set amount of money to spend on technology each year. It is largely a zero-sum game. Over the last few years, massive privately held AI firms, the companies building the underlying foundational text and image models, have raised billions of dollars. They are now knocking on the doors of those CIOs, selling enterprise-grade AI platforms.
So the pie isn't getting bigger, just more sliced up.
Exactly. Citi argues that if a global enterprise decides they suddenly need to spend $10 million on new AI compute infrastructure, they have to cut $10 million from somewhere else in their budget. The fear is that those dollars will flow to the shiny new private AI startups, effectively cannibalizing the budgets that would traditionally go to software incumbents like Autodesk. Citi estimates these private AI firms could siphon off over $100 billion in net new enterprise revenue.
Wow. So the risk isn't necessarily that Autodesk's product is bad, but simply that the oxygen in the IT budget room is being sucked up by foundational AI compute costs.
That's a huge part of the bear case.
And speaking of compute costs, that has to be a concern for Autodesk's internal margins, too. Running a massive 3D model like Bernini in the cloud requires an incredible amount of processing power. As they shift more of their workload from desktop processing to cloud-based AI inference, isn't there a risk that their server bills will skyrocket, putting downward pressure on their gross profit margins?
Absolutely. AI inference, the act of the AI actually generating a response or a 3D model, is incredibly compute-intensive and expensive compared to traditional cloud hosting. Managing those gross margins while scaling consumption pricing will be a delicate tightrope walk for management over the next few years.
Okay, so we have the technological budget risks. But reading further into the risk factors of the 10K, Autodesk is also deeply exposed to the macro geopolitical environment.
Highly exposed. Autodesk is a truly global entity. They derive a full 64% of their net revenue from international markets. And the macroeconomic landscape shifted significantly in February 2026 when the U.S. government implemented a 10% global temporary import surcharge.
Now, I want to be very clear for the listener. We are going to look at this strictly through the lens of objective financial mechanics. We are not taking any political stance on trade policy or tariffs. We're simply acknowledging that this policy exists in the real world, and it has a mathematical ripple effect on multinational corporations. How does a U.S. import surcharge on physical goods actually threaten a software company that sells digital downloads and cloud subscriptions?
It is a great question because at first glance, a software company doesn't care about tariffs on steel or shipping containers. However, international trade policies operate on the principle of reciprocity. The primary financial risk, as detailed in the SEC filings, is that this U.S. surcharge on physical imports could trigger retaliatory measures from other nations. And the weapon of choice for foreign governments looking to retaliate against the United States is often targeted at America's biggest export technology.
So they hit us where it hurts.
Exactly. Specifically, foreign governments in Europe or Asia could implement new or drastically increase existing digital services taxes, often referred to as DSTs.
Let's define a digital services tax.
A digital services tax is a tax levied by a foreign government on the revenue a tech company generates within its borders, regardless of whether that company has a physical corporate headquarters there. So if Autodesk sells $1 million worth of cloud software in France, France might apply a 3% or 5% tax directly on that gross revenue.
Got it. So if the U.S. taxes physical imports, the European Union might respond by hiking those DSTs on American cloud companies. This creates a macroeconomic vulnerability that could materially eat into Autodesk's international revenue margins.
Precisely. It is a major vulnerability.
That makes perfect sense. It's a geopolitical game of chess, and software companies are often the pawns. Are there any other lingering concerns in the bear case that caught your eye?
Two other quick points of friction. First, there's the issue of financial modeling noise. Wall Street despises unpredictability. The transition to the new transaction model, combined with a broader industry shift from multi-year upfront billing to annual billing installments, makes predicting Autodesk's quarterly cash flows incredibly complex for external analysts. It creates noise in the numbers. Even if the underlying business is healthy, a confusing quarterly statement can cause extreme volatility in the stock price.
That's a good point. Analysts hate when they can't predict the next quarter smoothly.
Right. And second, there is a heavy regulatory burden emerging around AI itself. Autodesk specifically cited the European Union's Artificial Intelligence Act in their 10K.
Regulating an AI that designs buildings feels infinitely more complex than regulating a chatbot.
It is. The EU AI Act places strict requirements on high-risk AI systems. If you are deploying an AI that calculates structural engineering loads, you have to prove to regulators that the model is safe, unbiased, and transparent in how it makes its calculations. Ensuring global compliance across varying jurisdictions will require massive, ongoing legal and engineering investments.
But it's not all regulatory headwinds. I did see a very positive domestic tax development mentioned in the filings.
Yes, on the domestic front, the passage of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, or OBBA, in July 2025, provided a significant tailwind for software companies.
What did that bill actually do?
This legislation permanently eliminated the previous requirement to capitalize and amortize U.S. research and development expenses over 5 years. It essentially allows Autodesk to immediately deduct their domestic R&D costs in the year they occur. Because of this structural tax change, CFO Janesh Moorjani noted on the call that Autodesk expects to pay no meaningful U.S. federal cash tax in fiscal year 2027.
That is an astonishing financial reality. No meaningful U.S. federal cash tax for a company that just generated $2.4 billion in free cash flow. That is a massive boost to their domestic capital efficiency, giving them even more dry powder to fund Project Bernini. So, it is time to synthesize everything we have unpacked today. Weighing all the evidence, you have the incredible financial strength, the predictable power of that 110% net revenue retention, the deep 4 to 5 year AI moat created by Project Bernini, and the transition to direct billing.
Lots of tailwinds.
But you have to balance that against the near-term disruption of firing 1,000 sales staff, the macroeconomic threat of AI budget displacement from startups, and the geopolitical tariff risks regarding digital services taxes. When you put all that into the crucible, what is the final strategic outlook? What is the verdict on Autodesk's consumption pivot?
Synthesizing the data across all the institutional reports, The consensus strategic outlook points to a high conviction in the transition.
High conviction, okay.
Yeah, while the near-term sales restructuring introduces undeniable execution risks, specifically in the first half of fiscal 2027, where billings might look choppy, the underlying architectural shift of the business is just too strong to ignore.
The long-term vision is clear.
The pivot away from legacy, seat-based subscriptions toward a consumption-based platform that monetizes machine-driven time unlocks incredible terminal value. It perfectly positions Autodesk to be the primary beneficiary of the physical world's transition to AI. They have found a way to financially offset the human labor constraints that are currently choking global infrastructure development. The engine they are building is designed specifically for the new race.
You know, I want to take all these high-level concepts, the financial modeling, the acronyms, the foundational AI theories, and bring them crashing back down to reality for you, the listener. Because it is very easy to get lost in conversations about TAM and RPO, and forget that this technology is currently dictating how the physical world around you is being built right now. I want to share two very tangible partnerships highlighted in our sources that show this new platform in action today.
I love these real-world examples.
First, let's look at the intersection of infrastructure and entertainment. Autodesk has entered a massive multi-year partnership with the Kraft Group. For those who follow sports, they own the New England Patriots. Autodesk is now their official design and make platform.
Oh, wow.
And this isn't a marketing gimmick where they just slap an Autodesk logo on the side of the stadium. The Kraft Group is actively implementing the Autodesk Construction Cloud to streamline and execute massive long-term infrastructure projects. We are talking about major structural upgrades to Gillette Stadium itself and the massive real estate development surrounding it.
And that partnership perfectly illustrates the make and operate lifecycle expansion we dissected earlier. The Kraft Group isn't just hiring an architect to design a new VIP suite. They are using Autodesk to create a digital foundation that ensures operational efficiency for the facility over the next several decades. They are building the digital twin of the stadium.
Precisely. It is the living embodiment of the 50-year monetization cycle. The second example is even more profound, and it hits on a deeply human level. Autodesk has teamed up with a company called BioDapt. BioDapt was founded by U.S. Paralympian Mike Schultz. They are using Autodesk's platform to advance next-generation high-performance prosthetics.
That is incredible.
Using AI-powered generative design tools and advanced metal 3D printing within Autodesk Fusion, they are engineering prosthetic limbs that can withstand the intense, violent torque and impact of professional snowboarding and motocross. The human engineers set the parameters, the maximum weight, the required shock absorption, the connection points to the human body. Then, the AI in Fusion runs thousands of iterations overnight. It generates organic, almost alien-looking titanium structures that reduce the total weight of the prosthetic while actually increasing its structural integrity.
Which serves as the perfect real-world application of the difference between generic AI and physical world AI. A generic language model cannot design a titanium knee joint. It does not understand human biomechanics, shear force, or metal fatigue.
Not at all.
Fusion, powered by Autodesk's foundational models, understands all of it. It takes the mathematical reality of physics and translates it into a physical object that restores mobility to an athlete.
It's incredible. We are watching artificial intelligence move from the computer screen into physical reality. It's changing how we build our stadiums, how we power our data centers, and how we restore human capability. Which brings us to the end of our deep dive. As always, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, something that builds on everything we've discussed today.
Let's hear.
We have talked extensively about Project Bernini and Agentic AI acting as incremental capacity, a digital junior partner to help human engineers overcome the labor shortage. But if Autodesk's AI continues its exponential evolution, if a platform like Bernini truly masters physics, memorizes every local building code on Earth, perfects structural load distributions, and seamlessly handles MEP constructability across an asset's entire lifecycle,
It raises a profound, almost existential question about the future of the engineering professions themselves.
Exactly. Will the architects and structural engineers of tomorrow still be creators? Will they still sit down at a digital drafting table, staring at a blank canvas, designing visions from scratch? Or will they simply become editors of machine-generated worlds? Will the human role be reduced to curating, tweaking, and approving a dozen fully engineered, code-compliant skyscrapers that the AI generated overnight while they slept? It brings us right back to our master mechanic staring at the disassembled engine on the garage floor. Sometimes you have to tear apart a perfectly good, highly profitable system. You have to change the rules of how your sales team operates, and you have to rebuild your core technology from the ground up. Because the vehicles of the future aren't going to drive on the roads we use today, they're going to fly. Risk defined, portfolio protected.